This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dula from Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
The Bad Batch is here. Now you can actually go on to Disney Plus to talk about The Bad Batch, or will be able to on May the 4th, which of course is Star Wars Day. And I am going to review this with a very special guest, Mr. James Burns from Jedi News. Jedi News is, of course, your number one-stop place to go for Star Wars news and information, my site that I certainly go to. James, welcome back to Coffee with Kenobi.
Thank you for having me, sir. How are you?
Doing so well. It's great to chat with you, of course. I am very excited to talk with you about The Bad Batch because you are obviously a gigantic Star Wars fan, and you and I have had the good fortune to get a sneak peek at this. So before we talk about the episode itself, and it is fair to say we will be spoiling the debut episode, so if you have not yet seen episode 1 of The Bad Batch, then I would suggest pausing this and coming back to it. James and I will certainly be happy to wait for you. But if you just want to hear what's going on and you can't wait, then this will be the place to go. So, James, before we talk about the actual episode, let everybody know what your anticipation and hype level was like for The Bad Batch before you saw the debut.
Well, for me, this is a continuation of the Clone Wars. The Clone Wars is something that we've had it seems for years and years and years. When it has been, it's like 12, 13 years of the Clone Wars already, which is crazy. And the Clone Wars to me is a very, very special show. It's been in our lives. We've had, almost 100 episodes. It's crazy, isn't it? Sorry, beyond 100 episodes. What am I talking about? And I don't know, it just instills, it is Star Wars. It's the last thing that George touched. We know that Dave Filoni spoke to George about where the show was going, and so this is for us people that grew up with Star Wars, this is as close as we're going to get to, dare I say it, George level canon maybe. And coming off the back of season 7, which ended last year on Disney Plus, which was incredible, we get a sort of continuation using the same visual style, the same animators, a lot of the same cast and crew. So for me, this is really, really up there. I'm really engaged. I want to see what's going to happen to these characters. I want to see how the story develops. And I don't think we're going to be let down too much.
Okay, so you were definitely very hyped for this. For me, I was excited for it because it was a continuation of the story. The Bad Batch characters, we only got a very small sample size, 4 very memorable episodes from the final season of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, but very, very fun. Honestly, how amazing the live action Marvel stuff has been has kind of gotten me sidetracked a little bit. So while I was still excited, my excitement was sort of dissipated because of Falcon and the Winter Soldier and WandaVision. But I was still ready to go, and just knowing we're going to get more Star Wars, and as you said, hopefully see some kind of a continuation of the Clone Wars, was certainly very, very high up there. And certainly by the trailer and what we've been hearing, it was going to be a very similar visual style. So now you and I have seen it. Before we break down the episode specifically, give me your letter grade, A to F, and just sort of an overall summation of your thoughts on the first episode.
I'd give it an A-, which is pretty good. There are always things that can be improved, and we'll get into that a little bit later, I'm sure. But I thought they did an incredible job of continuing the story. I mean, it really is a continuation of the Clone Wars story. It starts off exactly where, or pretty much close to where we left Clone Wars, and we get a little bit of backstory, and then it just jumps in. And I really liked it. I liked the action. I liked the energy. I liked the visuals. I liked the jokes. Yeah. Pretty pumped.
Perfect. Good. I watched it a couple of times, as I know you did as well. And I'm going to give it a B, a nice solid B. I thought it was, I will say, if we're only grading the first 15 minutes of the episode, then it's as high of an A+ as you could possibly be. I thought it was a tad long, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I would have been happy with splitting up this episode into 3 episodes. In fact, I think there are 3 organic cuts where you could probably make. Yes. But the characters are interesting. There's actually a little more going on than initially thought. And this particular era of Star Wars, Clone Wars slash the formation of the Empire, is my favorite era of Star Wars storytelling. So I think people are going to be very hyped and they're really going to love it. So, okay, let's just start off with the beginning. I mentioned the first 15 minutes of it right away, the way that and again, if you want to go in fresh and you haven't seen it yet, this will be a good time to press pause.
Yes.
Okay, that's two spoiler suggestions. So here we go. The beginning of the episode, hearing the voice of Tom Kane was so great and so bittersweet because of his health. But the transition of what happens, seeing actual animation of scenes from Revenge of the Sith and having it go from Clone Wars melting away to the logo of the Bad Batch, I thought was a very organic, exciting way to start it. What did you think?
I really liked it. I think bringing Tom in to do that so that for those of us that are invested in the original Clone Wars series, that we can see the transition from one to the other. And I don't think it's much of a spoiler to say that Tom isn't narrating further episodes. I think this is the only one he's doing. And I think it's a nice nod to what he's done before. And it also, for those that are new to this series and maybe haven't watched Clone Wars, it does fill in that background.
It does. And seriously, it's just so organic because you feel like, wait a minute, this is Clone Wars, but it's really not Clone Wars. And I spent a little bit of time sort of wondering, where are they going to go with this? But right away, we get to see, and again, this is major spoiler territory, but we get to see an incredible surprise. I'll let you explain that, and then we'll just sort of talk about that whole opening sequence.
Yeah, I was very surprised that we would be getting a return of Kanan Jarrus, or as he was once before, Caleb Doom. And to hear Freddie Prince's voice as well was really cool and completely unexpected. I had no idea that he was voicing the character again, or even that the character was going to be there. So to have him there and to see how his master is killed at the hands of Order 66 and all of the other events that are going on there and then was great. And I know you can understand why those first 15 minutes you would give an A+ to.
Yes. I mean, honestly, the reason I gave it a B, I think it's because the opening sequence is so incredible. It hits all the right beats for me, both with drama, with storytelling, with characterization, and with Caleb Doom, who of course becomes Kanan Jarrus, who is one of my favorite characters in all of fiction, not just Star Wars. And to hear a Freddie doing a younger version of Caleb Doom was just so breathtaking. I had goosebumps. I was so excited. And to see the introduction of the Bad Batch was great, but then to see, the escape, the thrills, the confusion, the actual execution of Order 66 and how that plays out. But to see a breathtaking sequence where Caleb shows his very formidable Jedi skills, even at a young age, was great. And then you have this frustration, and you get intrigued right away with, okay, Order 66 has happened or is happening. Some of the Bad Batch is affected by it, but Crosshair clearly is not. What was kind of your thought process during some of that event?
Before I answer that, I'm just going to go back to the moment because it's actually Caleb that introduces the Bad Batch to us.
Yes.
Which I thought was a lovely touch as well. So he's the one that says, "These are my friends," and he names them all. And I thought that was a very, very clever link to Rebels and also to Clone Wars. And it does tie everything together. And when we talk about our criticisms of the episode later on, that was also one of my criticisms, and I'll come on to that. But I think, seeing Order 66 happen in front of us, which we've seen in Revenge of the Sith, and we've seen it in other fiction and other places too. To see it there and to see how the clones reacted, and as you say, of the 5 members of Bad Batch, 4 of them didn't know what the hell was really going on, but Crosshair did, and we immediately see that Crosshair is going after Caleb because Deep has been killed, Caleb's master's been killed already, and he wants to kill Caleb because that's what the inhibitor chip in his head is telling him to do.
Yeah, and the way that it plays out, there's even shades of the music or echoes of the music from Order 66. Kevin Kiner back to do the music for the Bad Batch, which is wonderful and only right considering what of the animation that he has done. But see, now we'd seen in the Kanan Jarrus miniseries written by Greg Weisman
Yep.
back, I think, in 2015. We'd sort of seen this, but I really like how it played out here. I haven't gone back to the comic to see if there's any sort of crossover or cross pollination that doesn't work, but I think it does if memory serves. But to see Depa Billaba, not only the grace and beauty she exhibits when fighting, but the tragic impact that it has, really is a massive sucker punch to the viewer, I think.
Yes. Well, it's showing how real this war was and how it ended with, executing Order 66 and killing all the Jedi just because, a certain somebody wanted them out of the way, and how that was planned all along. The first 3 prequel films is leading up to that very moment, and then obviously, Anakin becoming Vader. That is all there, and all that storytelling sort of leads to this moment.
It really does. And so after the moment, after we get a little bit of tension between Hunter and Crosshair, we then transition to returning to Camino, and then we start to see some interactions between the Bad Batch and the clones. We have a food fight.
Which is really
we have
cool.
it was just very entertaining. And then we kind of get to start to know some of the personalities of the Bad Batch. How would you, at this point, sort of evaluate the characters of the Bad Batch themselves based on what we've seen, not only in the food fight, but their reaction to Palpatine's infamous speech where he declares the formation of the Galactic Empire? I guess we can just break them down one at a time. Let's look at
Yeah.
Hunter. What do you think of Hunter?
Yes. Well, Hunter is a mean, sorry, I'm going to say a badass clone who is, he knows what he's doing. I think he's very, very perceptive. He is completely aware of what needs to be done and how it needs to happen, and he executes it. And he's sort of the leader of the Bad Batch, I guess. He seems to be the one, and I know that there's been some I've seen online comparing Bad Batch to the A-Team, which for those viewers that don't know what the A-Team was, it was a 1980s TV show in the US and the UK, and it was pretty good. But I do see some similarities.
For me, and I'm not sure where you stand on this, but to me, Hunter is my absolute favorite. He's my favorite of the Bad Batch. I gravitate towards those kind of heroic leader types. I mean, he's certainly not Captain America, but it's the some semblance of a mold. I like that he's got integrity. I like that he makes critical thinking choices. They all do, but he's more willing to stand up for it.
Yep.
And of course, his prowess on the battlefield and the way he uses those knives, I think, is absolutely fantastic.
Yep, agreed.
So now let's go on to Wrecker. Wrecker, I got to admit, at first I thought, okay, he's fine. He's entertaining. He's sort of a one-trick pony. But throughout this episode, I feel like he shows a little bit of depth in multiple sides of his personality, the compassion aspect that he has, and he's actually more intelligent than he lets on. I thought was great.
He is the B.A. Baracus of the group. Let's use the analogy, but he really is. He does come across that way, and there does seem to be some familiar traits, but he shows a lot of caring and compassion here, which I really liked. I think now's a good as time as any just to say that all of these Bad Batch are being voiced by one person, who is the awesome D. Bradley Baker. And the way Dan and I were fortunate enough to go to a press conference a few days ago where D. Bradley Baker was being interviewed, and one of the questions is did you stop in between each recording session to change the voices for each of the clones? Were they all recorded separately? And what we learned during that was no, he was going from voice to voice to voice without any change. And to me, that's just unbelievable that he can switch between those 5 characters that all sound completely different and can convey so much expression and warmth. Just incredible.
Oh, it's phenomenal. When he announced in that press conference and when he demonstrated it, really how he does that, and the fact that he just reads it straight through, switching voices without any breaks, just shows the caliber, the depth of his talent and his performance, and he truly seems to enjoy it as well.
Very much so. Very much so. I'm in complete awe of these voice artists because they can do that. You know, James Arnold Taylor, when he does his one-man show, it's very, very similar. He's switching from voice to voice to voice. But to actually do that in a recording session when you're reading from a script, it just blows my mind.
It's absolutely another level. So let's talk. There's a couple left. Let's talk about. We'll do Echo for last because he's sort of the newest member of the Bad Batch. It's a pretty new Bad Batch anyway. But what about Crosshair? Crosshair is a bit more complicated, and actually, through a conversation we're going to talk about later in the show, he's somewhat tragic too. Tell me about Crosshair.
He's very reserved. He's the thinker, I think, and he takes a step back, and obviously his skill is that he can shoot with great precision, but he seems to contemplate a lot of things. Won't whereas Wrecker will just forge his way forward. He takes a step back, decides what he's going to do, and then does it. And obviously, as we learn throughout the episode, it's difficult to say without giving too much away, but I guess we're talking about spoilers anyway. Obviously, his inhibitor switch is still in full force, and he's still reacting to things that are being told to him by the Galactic Empire. So we see a conflict with him and the other 4 members of Bad Batch because he doesn't feel that they're fulfilling what they're supposed to be doing.
Right. And we learn later with a conversation that he has, I guess I'm kind of going out of order, but he basically, while this chip is, he's still accepting orders, it's still somewhat flawed because of his mutation as a clone itself, but still enough that it impacts his decision-making to a degree and his ability to interact with the team the way that he normally does, if memory serves, based on the 4 episodes of the Bad Batch himself, or of the Clone Wars itself. But I think he was always my least favorite, and certainly that's amplified by this. As his inhibitor chip is amplified, so is my dislike for him. But I think that's by design, and I don't think we've seen the end of that particular story. His skill is so intense and severe that Mason and I were debating who was more skilled, Crosshair or Hawkeye. And so we had a lot of fun with that. But let's talk about Tech, who is Tom Gross's favorite. Tech, I think, is fun. While Crosshair is certainly introspective, Tech is certainly the techie. He's the one he's almost the brainy Smurf of the bunch.
Yes.
But he just does it very matter of factly. He's completely uninterested in your opinion of him because he's just spouting facts, and to him that is sort of the lifeblood of what's going on. But I found him really kind of intriguing, especially the way he dispatches some of the battle droids too.
I really liked him. He's obviously the brains, and he's trying to work out the best solution to the problem in front of them. So if that's defeating, a squad of battle droids, then he's thinking ahead. We're in a ship. We can use the ceiling to ricochet bullets off of, and we can get rid of all the battle droids that way. So he's always one step ahead and thinking ahead. And I really like that. And I think, the skills of the 4 that we've talked about so far, they all complement one another. They're all different skills, but together they are the Bad Batch. They are Clone Force 99, and their skills work really well together.
Yes, and then the last one we have is Echo, who we're very familiar with from the long history of the Clone Wars you mentioned at the top of the show. Echo, I think I was particularly looking at him to see how he fits in, to see if there's any kind of sort of a we're the original 4, you're the new guy kind of thing. I never picked it up a single time, but I will say that during the food fight and some of the interactions with the other clones, and some of that may very well be because of the inhibitor chip, there's certainly sort of an us versus them mentality. You could almost argue that there's a certain degree of discrimination because amongst clones, they're considered different because of their mutations, even though they're clearly like super powered compared to the rest of them. What'd you make of that whole conflict?
Yeah, you can definitely see that, and I think that the rest of the clones just think that these are rejects, effectively, and I think that they're frustrated that they get called upon to complete certain missions, and they succeed. Whatever mission they normally go on, they come back and they are successful, and I think that irritates the clones. And I think there's some, and I think Clone Force 99 know that they're able to achieve victories and they're able to succeed, so they don't care what the others think. I don't know. I don't know whether it's that they think they're better than them or not, but there is definitely some agitation going on.
I mean, honestly, I feel like it reminds me of mutants. We're certainly doing a lot of mixed pop culture metaphors here, but it reminds me of mutants, whereas everyone looks the same. Mutants are super powered, and that is a threat to humanity, so it causes a lot of tension and conflict. And we see that here. I certainly got the vibe that the regular clones, the regs, as they're called,
Yep.
By the members of the Bad Batch, they're certainly we're superior to you kind of a thing, but you don't know how much of that is extended from the inhibitor chip. I get the sense, based on the fact that you get the sense there have been a lot of things besides food fights amongst the whole group on Camino,
Yes.
that this is something somewhat of a regular phenomenon, if that's even the right word, which I found intriguing, as did I find the introduction of Palpatine's famous speech that we talked about a little bit ago, and text saying, you know what, do you still think the Empire's not any different? Now, Crosshair, as they have to go on a mission because Tarkin shows up. I guess we're jumping around a lot. I guess would have helped me to make an outline. I'm just so excited. It's like a stream of consciousness that we finally get to talk about this with each other, which is great. But let's talk about Tarkin shows up, voiced by the incredible Stephen Stanton. A lot of great returns of voice actors from the world of Star Wars animation. But he shows up and he introduces the notion of the clones versus creating a new batch of troopers. Go ahead and talk about that, James, and what that means for the Star Wars mythology.
Yeah, because that was very interesting. Obviously, Tarkin's come along, and we've seen a little bit of Tarkin talking about stormtroopers and clones before. And here he's turned up, and he's saying, well, we don't really need this clone army anymore. We can replace this clone army with some other form of army that would be much, much cheaper, training recruits and bringing in this sort of raw talent, as it were. And he's very unclear as to whether he wants to spend the money on the clone army, which really upsets Lama Su and the others on Kamino, because they're already breeding the next generation of clones. And he basically he wants to see how Clone Force 99, the Bad Batch, will work under pressure. And he sets them a test, which is within the Kamino grounds. They actually have the ability to run simulations, and he puts the Bad Batch to a test. And I don't know whether this was to force them to show their hand or not, but it gets very uncomfortable, because after they've defeated the normal round of enemies, we see a very familiar enemy introduced, and Tarkin tells the Kaminians to turn on live ammunition even, which the Bad Batch are extremely puzzled by. Why would they be using live ammunition in a simulation? But I liked that we saw what looked like a version of the Dark Trooper, especially after we've seen them so recently in Mandalorian. Although this is 30 odd years before, and would we really be seeing that Dark Trooper in the same sort of way so many years prior, when, what has the Empire been doing for 30 years with the Dark Trooper?
Right. Well, this would appear to be phase 1 of the Dark Trooper, and they don't react to or make a comment on the fact that they're new droids. So had they seen them before, or some sort of a similar model? It's very difficult to say. But the look of them is outstanding, and you can tell they're going to evolve into a much more deadly version of themselves. Tarkin, based on his observations of that food fight, sees how they fight together differently. And Nala Se, one of the Kaminoans we're introduced to, she says that, because of their defect, they basically do things much differently. But Tarkin is intrigued by this, which is kind of cool, because usually in the Empire, if you're different, then they have no business with you because you might be a threat to them because you may not obey. But he instantly seems to think that since these are clones, they do things differently. Maybe they are maybe a more superior version of the clones, which I would say they certainly are. And so he puts them through a number of tests, like you said, and it becomes different. Now, let's say does not want there to be any danger or live rounds fired because of the damage it may do to the facility is what she says. But it's hard to say she actually has any compassion for the clones. I guess we could probably argue that throughout the episode itself.
Yeah, I don't think she does. And interestingly, Tarkin says, well, no matter what happens, if they get destroyed or if the facility gets damaged in any way, the Empire will, the Galactic Empire will actually make sure that you're not out of pocket.
Yeah, they're going to compensate you. But he also, in that earlier, he said that, it's going to save me money not to use clones. So
yes,
he basically is using. Yeah, he's basically using the financial aspect of things to his advantage, but he's also inconsistent, which is certainly the Imperial way to talk out of both sides of your mouth. Absolutely. So it's a thrilling sequence. It's very action packed, very reminiscent of when the first season of the Clone Wars. I can't think of the particular episode, was when we meet Clone 99.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
The whole training montage. So it was very cool to see that. Eventually, Tarkin says, "You know what? There's an insurgent. We need you to go to another planet, and we need you to find out what's going on." But they meet a character who's an integral to the food fight and integral to what happens on Kamino, Omega. Yeah, Omega is. Go ahead.
I was going to say, before we get to Omega, he sends them to the Onderon sector.
That's right.
But I don't think they actually mention the name of the planet. Is that right? I don't think
that is right. It's so rare to actually name a planet, and I've actually asked Lucasfilm about this. Okay, why are we always moons and systems? Why can't we just say the names of the planets?
Yeah. No, I agree. Which is so they're going to this sector. We don't know where they're going necessarily, but this is where they're going, or this is the area that they're going. But yeah, they did. Right. I don't believe that they mentioned the name of the planet. So.
No, they don't.
So yeah, you were talking about Omega.
Yeah, tell me about Omega.
So we're introduced to this young character called Omega, and she is a young female, and we learn very quickly that she is helping Lama Su with some medical experiments.
Yes.
And we also learn fairly quickly that she is a clone herself.
That's right, which I think is sort of a major reveal. Yes. I mean, if there is a major reveal for a character you just met, but it is certainly it's going to be integral to the formation of the series and what happens with these characters.
Yes.
But what do you think of her? What do you think of her?
Well, this is my criticism, because if you think back to the original few episodes of the Clone Wars, we were introduced to Ahsoka. Mm-hmm. And if you think back to the original episodes of Rebels, we were introduced to Ezra. So now I appreciate that you have to set things up when you're embarking on a new series, but part of me thought, well, we actually know the Bad Batch. We actually know these 5 characters. So do you really need to do that? You could have just set up a story, perhaps. And I don't know. Part of me thought, oh, here we go again. We're going to have this young Padawan-like character who's taken in by a group, or whether they be, the crew of the Ghost or the Jedi, and then is going to be trained and brought forward, and they're going to learn lessons, etc., etc. So I thought that was part of me. Initially thought, well, maybe that's just some laziness going on here, and they're using the same sort of models with the same young character, which is great because it draws in that younger audience as well, which is really important. And I think things like the food fight also help bring in that younger audience too. But then I took a step back and thought, well, hold on a minute. There's something a lot deeper going on here, because she's a clone. And as we see throughout the episode, she's actually quite skillful. And she doesn't understand where those skills come from. And obviously, we can only guess where those skills come from. But it does leave us with more questions than answers. Purposely, I'm sure.
Yeah, which I love.
Yes.
So I'm of a similar vein. I mean, there will undoubtedly, and there could be good versions of this, and ones maybe not as well thought out. But there will be people that will maybe groan a bit because this is an archetype, a character archetype that we've seen
Yep.
before, but not only in Star Wars, but in lots of stories.
Of course.
And I mean, the voice acting is great. Her character design is wonderful. I like at the end of the episode, again, we're really jumping around more than I usually like to do, but that's the host's fault, not the guest's fault.
No problem.
Is that she does have some skill that isn't inherent. She has a very cool relationship with Hunter that I like, which I look forward to seeing how that is explored. But I did wonder, do we need this? We barely know the Bad Batch. What's the end game here? But I don't know that. I of course thought about Ahsoka and Snips and Sky Guy. When I first saw the Clone Wars in theaters and when the movie showed up, I liked her. I thought she was cool.
Same here.
Did I love her, or did I know that she would be one of my favorite characters in the history of Star Wars? No, not at that time I didn't. But I was willing to give her a chance. Ezra, I just accepted right away along with the rest of them because they were all brand new to me. And then with Omega, I'm going to take a wait and see approach. I do think she's charming. Does she work for me? Not entirely, but that doesn't mean that she won't. And for all we know, what she develops into may be something that may be absolutely incredible. And we certainly have no inside information on that. And they're, of course, keeping that extremely tight to the vest, so we have no way of knowing. But I'm willing to give it a chance. But I will say right off the bat that I'm not entirely sure at this point how I feel about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It makes complete sense. And I tend to agree with you. But maybe that's deliberate. Maybe that's how we should feel. Maybe that's exactly where they want us to be. I think it'll be interesting to see how the character develops and as we learn more about the character.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
If you are getting ready to plan that Walt Disney World or Disneyland vacation, look no further than MEI and Mouse Fan Travel, the official travel partner of Coffee with Kenobi. Their signature service and expert advice will help clients maximize their vacation time and dollar. And it is a no-cost, no-obligation quote. That's right. You can have them help you set up your vacation exactly how you want to make it work for you and your family. They'll give you all kinds of tips about what is the best day to go to what parks, how to use the park reservation system on either coast, and what the lines are like and what that means for you as far as planning and getting there when the park opens. And whether you are an experienced vacation planner or you are a first-timer, they can help you as well. They contact you throughout the trip to make sure things are going well, to give you suggestions and advice, or answer any questions that you might have, and you will have them when you're traveling on these amazing vacations. And there's nothing better than having Becky Mankin and her team at MEI and Mouse Fan Travel to help you as you go along. Becky Mankin and her team are fantastic, and I use them both for travel, for Coffee with Kenobi, and for my family vacation. So if you feel safe and comfortable traveling, MEI and Mouse Fan Travel will help you get to the Disney theme parks, the cruise lines when they open, the future Star Wars Halcyon, the Galactic Star Cruiser, and of course, Celebration 2022 in Anaheim. If you have any questions or want to go ahead and get a free, no obligation quote, please be sure to go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefan-travel and let them know that Dan Z and Coffee with Kenobi sent you. So I guess at this point, we have basically three major things that I want to talk about. One would be the reunion with a character that is very familiar to Star Wars, both from Clone Wars, Rebels, and Rogue One. And I'm talking, of course, about the one and only Saw Gerrera. I want to talk about the breakout, and I want to talk about the finale as far as what breaks down there. So let's just take them in order. Let's talk about the reunion with Saw Gerrera. I really like how that was set up. I like the tension. Crosshair is still on the team, helping to create the tension. But I'm not sure of the actor's name, but when Saw shows up, it was to me, it was integral to see, look, these aren't insurgents, these are people. Crosshair has his sights set on an elderly woman, a grandmother type matronly figure, and it's very unsettling. Hunter puts a stop to it, and right away we're introduced to the idea of, Palpatine was famous for hating or dislike. I guess he hated the dogma, the rules of the Jedi. It's not because Palpatine wanted critical thinking. It's just because he couldn't stand them. But Hunter shows a different perspective, as do the rest of the Bad Batch, besides Crosshair, and that is, yeah, we have an order, but we break rules all the time. We do what we think is best. Now, is that good for children? No. But when you're a seasoned soldier with compassion and empathy, that's a whole other thing. Let's talk about the introduction of Saw Gerrera. And do you know the name of the voice actor by chance?
I don't to hand. I don't.
I'll look it up while you wax poetic about what it meant to see Saw. There we go again. And kind of that whole conversation there. I thought it was very powerful.
It was. And I think we knew that the insurgents weren't going to be Jedi, or as they thought they were going to be separatists. Obviously they weren't. And to see this group of people that, ranged in age from young children to elderly people as well, they were never going to kill them. And I think they were very confused when they saw them, and they soon realized that these people in no way formed a threat. And as you said a few minutes ago, they make their own rules, and they clearly saw that killing these people would make no difference to the Galactic Empire, or so they think. Obviously, we know a little bit better that some of these individuals go on to make a big difference to the Galactic Empire.
Yes.
But regardless, at this point or at this moment in time, they just feel that these are, individuals that have been caught in a bitter war that's just come to an end, and they shouldn't be killed. They shouldn't be harmed. They should just be able to go about their business, basically. And that's the conclusion that they come to. But obviously Crosshair is not happy about that, because Crosshair's been given orders to kill these insurgents, to get rid of them. And he doesn't like it that Hunter and the rest of the group are sort of walking away from it.
Right.
He understands that they don't always follow rules, but he feels that they were given an order and they have to carry this through.
Right. The original actor is Andrew Kishino, Kishino. Yeah, and of course later played by Forrest Whitaker.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I had to look that one up. But what I like about the appearance of Saw is when he's talking to Hunter. I mean, they certainly capture the Bad Batch, and the Bad Batch does surrender. Let's be clear on that, reluctantly from Crosshair's perspective. But the conversation between the two, I'm not going to spoil it here, but I think it's really worth multiple viewings, because there's some interesting insights in sort of the psychology of war and what it means to fight and what we are actually fighting for. I want people to pay close attention to what Saw does with Hunter's blaster and the direction he points it, based on what he's saying and what he's talking about, which direction the blaster is pointing, while ultimately giving Hunter the blaster and walking away with his back to him without even looking or seeming to be even remotely concerned about what Hunter's going to do, because he already sort of knows. And we know, as you said, thanks to the use of dramatic irony, we know how formidable of an opponent and a strategist Saw is. Yes. I think it says a lot about both characters in that sequence.
Yeah, and I just want to give credit to the writers here, because I think they've done a brilliant job at pulling lots of different strands together and, telling a really powerful story here. There's so much genocide going on around the world, and, people are being killed all over the place for no real reason, just because they're caught up in a war. And I think this is a really powerful image where, soldiers are sent to war to kill supposed insurgents, and they walk away.
Yeah.
And that's pretty powerful, especially in today's world.
I know. There's a lot of great metaphor here that I think are great. I've talked about many, many, many times, but the great thing about literature is you can talk about real things, but through the lens of fiction, and you can really get more conversation going than sometimes actually talking about the real moments themselves. So eventually they decide that they're going to go back, because there's a probe droid that shows up. I always like seeing probe droids.
Yes.
And Hunter realizes we've got to go back and we've got to bring Omega, because she really didn't want to stay on Camino, because she said things are different. Hunter dismisses it as fear, but there's more to it.
Well, before they went on this mission, Omega actually comes to them and says, I've heard Tarkin talking, and he doesn't trust you.
Yeah.
And she's worried for them. I mean, she's genuinely worried for them. And, I think Bad Batch initially were very surprised that this young girl has got an affinity for this group of 5, in essence, thugs. She knows them all by name. She cares about them. She's interested in what they want to do. She sits with them in the mess hall. She's doing all these things that are surprising them and surprising her, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's because she doesn't necessarily have a it's going to sound terrible, but she doesn't have parents,
Right.
which is true. And for all we know, the only person that she's been interacting with up until now has been Lama Su.
True.
And the regs, as they're called, probably ignore her because they wouldn't have anything to do with her. Why would they? Whereas this bunch of defective clones, admittedly at first don't want anything to do with her, but eventually come round and are willing to talk to her and to converse with her.
I love it. No, it's great. There's some interesting things here again. So again, as always happens when we break down these episodes of shows on Disney Plus or back on Disney XD and all those good things, I talking with my friends about this helps me to open up different avenues of possibility through the storytelling aspect, which I like. I really think it's on display quite well when they end up going back to Camino and getting captured. The way the 4 of them, because it is ultimately does become 4 of them. Well, it's 5 at first. Crosshair and Omega have this really, I think, important, very quick conversation that when I first watched it didn't really affect me. But when I looked at it a second time, the fact that she puts her hand on his shoulder and says, I know what you're going to do. I don't want you to do it. And I know it's not your fault. And he kind of holds his head and looks at her and shakes his head, as we've seen other clones do because of the inhibitor chip. And I think that's important to give us a little bit of reason to care about Crosshair, because he doesn't give us a lot of reason to throughout the episode. But that slight little touch, I think, is going to be crucial to what develops with his character.
Now, what does that tell us about Omega? Is she force sensitive? Can she see what, can she actually really see what's going to happen?
What I think, in Tech says this earlier, he says, well, you know what? People that are, I forget the exact term, but he says heightened powers of observation.
Okay.
So I didn't get that at all. I got it more that she just gets it. She's wise beyond her years. She's not, I don't know that she's necessarily clairvoyant, but she is precocious. And she gets a sense, she knows how the clones work because she's one herself. And she also has great empathy too. So that would be kind of what I thought. But I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I agree. But if you look at all the clones up until now have a pretty, I was going to say identical look, but obviously the Bad Batch are, clones that don't conform to that necessarily. So we don't know who she's been cloned from yet. But she does seem to be perceptive. We see her pick up a gun for the first time, and she instinctively knows what to do, and she has the ability to shoot the weapon with precision as good as Crosshair, which could indicate that she's got genes, the same clone genes that they have, maybe from Jango Fett. So there's all these conflicting things going on in my mind, and obviously that there's lots of questions, but we've never seen a clone before, and I'm talking about a clone trooper, as it were, have that sort of perception.
It is going to be fun. I really like the way that they work together. This is, to me, the most important part as far as Wrecker is concerned, because we see he's not just some big dumb brute. The way he tries to explain away to the shock troopers, why there's some noise, how he's able to sort of deduce just by kind of touching the wall and finding the hollow portion of the wall to punch, to me shows intelligence above, Hulk's smash. And I was glad for that, because Wrecker may have been one of my least favorites, but that elevated him. Not only that, but the way he interacts with Omega, I think those are nice things to see, that he's not just a brute.
Yep, agreed. And I like the way that they managed to get out of that situation and
Mhm.
to move the story on and to obviously to escape Camino.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. So they eventually do escape, and then we get this fantastic showdown at the end of
Yes.
the episode. So what kind of stands out to you about the finale of this?
Well, I liked the way that so as you alluded to, Crosshair is taken to check the effectiveness of the inhibitor chip, and they see that the inhibitor chip is working well, and he gets them to further enhance the chip to make it stronger. And then we see him dressed in an Imperial outfit. We then get an amazing showdown in the hangar bay of the Bad Batch shuttle with the Bad Batch crew and a group of the Emperor's best shooters, including Crosshair, who's fighting against his old teammates to stop them from leaving Camino.
The ending sequence is really cool. I always like, and I think a lot of us are probably this way, but I really like them being reunited with their gear. It's sort of like seeing Batman first put on his utility belt, or James Bond getting his Walter PPK, or just, I don't know, there's just something kind of fun about that. The hero feels incomplete without their sacred talismans or their equipment. So I always get a big charge out of that. But I think the most interesting part, or the part that kind of warmed my heart at the end, was a semi callback to Solo, when Han first steps into the cockpit of the Falcon.
Yes.
And they go to light speed, and you see it through his eyes. Omega has the same kind of a reaction. And I find things like that so beautiful and lovely, because at the end of the day, what makes these characters effective is their humanity. And imagine just being stuck on rainy, drabby old Camino your entire young life, and then suddenly going to light speed. I thought that was spectacular.
She's never been anywhere else. This is her first time in space. It's the first time leaving Camino. So I thought that was done very, very well, and I really liked that. I really liked the way that we saw that. As you say, we saw it all through her eyes.
It was great. So overall, I think I'm going to stick with my letter grade of a B. I do like it. I liked talking about it with you. I think they've planted some seeds here that may come to full fruition later.
Yes.
But is there anything we didn't talk about in the episode that you want to bring up before we wrap things up?
No, I just want to say that I think they've done an incredible job of bringing this to life. I think it was done very, very well. I really enjoyed the music was stunning. The visuals, we know it's using the same animation techniques that they used on the Clone Wars, so it looks visually stunning. It really does, and I can't wait for more. For me, this brings the Clone Wars back, albeit slightly differently, and it is a continuation. And it's nice to go beyond the events of Order 66, because we've got a bit of a gap. Obviously, we've got Rebels, which is set a few years beyond this. So we've got a nice little gap, and we don't know how many episodes of The Bad Batch we're getting. They've kept that very quiet. But we know that there is a finite amount.
It makes sense. That makes sense. To me, it is a natural, organic sequel to the Clone Wars.
Yes.
Very familiar, but also a different approach, almost like it vectors sort of slightly to the right. And I am here for it. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with these characters. The animation and the music are absolutely stunning and gorgeous. Steve Bradley Baker and the rest of the cast are, of course, at the very, very, very top of their game. And I think people are going to absolutely love it.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
As we near the end of the show today, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to have a cup of coffee with me, and for helping to spread the word about our Star Wars family we've got here at Coffee with Kenobi. Be sure to tune in Monday nights at 8 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook Live at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/live or www.facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi. And and have a cup of coffee, tea, or any beverage of your choosing with me as we continue the conversation. To join us in the CWK Cafe, which is our Facebook group, and share your Star Wars thoughts, comments, reviews, and opinions in a family-friendly, spoiler-free place that is also drama-free, go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/community and be part of the conversation, talk about this week's show, or just talk about some Star Wars. We have a lot of fun and you'll make some new friends as well as catch up with longtime friends along the way. I also want to thank all of the new and longtime members of the CWK Alliance and let you know how much I appreciate your help and encouragement. If you want to join the CWK Alliance, go to www.cwkalliance.com and sign up today. Not only will you help out Coffee with Kenobi, but you also get access to CWK Pour-Over, the exclusive weekly podcast not heard anywhere else. It's a great way to support and help out the show, and 10% of your monthly contributions go directly to the St. Jude Children's Hospital to support the incredibly important work they are doing to help these brave children and their families. Plus, contributors at the CWK All-Star level can watch a video podcast of CWK Pour-Over hosted by me, Tom Gross, and Corey Clubb. Feel free to reach out anytime if you have any questions. In addition to being part of the community on Facebook, please don't forget to visit our website at www.coffeewithkenobi.com for Star Wars news, announcements, reviews, videos, and so much more. If you have a question for me or just want to share your thoughts on the air, feel free to email me at danz@coffeewithkenobi.com and I'll share them on the show. You can also connect with me on Twitter at Mr. Zaire, MRZEHR, or on Instagram at DanZairCWK. There are also a lot more ways to connect with me and Coffee with Kenobi on social media. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Give us a like on Facebook at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi. Check us out on Pinterest or subscribe to our Coffee with Kenobi YouTube channel. On our YouTube channel, you can find Facebook Live video, different interviews throughout the years, highlights of video coverage throughout the Coffee with Kenobi history, and the audio podcast itself. You can order my book, The Star Wars Book, which I co-wrote with Lucasfilm's Pablo Hidalgo and Cole Horton, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Books A Million, Walmart, or anywhere books are sold. You can also find my writing on Coffee with Kenobi's website, as well as StarWars.com, where I am an official blogger there, and on IGN, where I contribute occasionally to articles about Star Wars, as well as other popular culture topics. If you are considering starting a podcast or a blog, let me know how I can help you get started and make your creative vision a reality. Be sure to check out danzmedia.com and we can get the process started. I am also available to come to your school, conference, business, or organization to talk about how to tap into your strengths and help you bring out your very best. I want to inspire you to be inspired so you can take that first step into a larger world. Thanks as always to our Coffee with Kenobi sponsors, especially MEI and Mouse Fan Travel, our travel partner and your one-stop shop for all things Walt Disney World, Disneyland, the Disney Cruise Lines, or anywhere on the planet you want to go on your vacation. Please go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel to book your magical vacation and help support Coffee with Kenobi in the process. If you like the show, please tweet out that you're listening, share it on Facebook, or invite your friends and family to tune in and share a cup of coffee with us. And if the Force is especially with you, please take a couple of minutes to rate and review the show on iTunes or Google Podcasts. Every review makes a huge difference and helps to spread the word, and I can't thank you enough for your help, for your support, and your friendship. I love so much being a part of this wonderful Star Wars community, and I can't thank you enough for all that you do for me and Coffee with Kenobi. Let us know what you think about the first episode of The Bad Batch titled Aftermath, which I don't think I mentioned at the top of the show. James, of course.
I was going to say, there's one other person that we haven't mentioned, and that's Dave Filoni.
Oh, that guy.
That guy, you know, the guy with the hat sometimes.
Yes, the other man with the hat.
Yes. So, you know, all credit to him. I mean, he's created some amazing characters and really taken them to the next level, and he's done a fab job. Really, really has.
Oh, yeah. He's the best. I mean, Star Wars is in such good hands with this incredible team working on The Bad Batch. Again, be sure to let us know what you think on social media, both at Coffee with Kenobi and on Jedi News. Speaking of Jedi News, James, where can people find you and all of your great work, especially if they want to continue the conversation?
So they can continue the conversation on social media. At Jedi News, you can find us on all of the social media platforms. It's just Jedi News Network. So it's all really simple. Same on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc. And obviously visit JediNews.com for all your Star Wars news.
I really can't think of a better way to spend May the 4th than with all of you here at Coffee with Kenobi breaking down The Bad Batch, the premiere episode of Disney's brand new Star Wars animated series exclusively on Disney+. Please be sure to let us know what you think about The Bad Batch, either on Coffee with Kenobi's Facebook page, our Facebook group, the CWK Cafe, on our social media feeds such as Twitter, or of course, email me, danz@coffeewithkenobi.com. Thanks so much, everybody, for sharing May the 4th with me. Have a great rest of your week. And remember, this is the podcast you're looking for. We will see you on Monday night to break down your top 5 favorite things you love about the premiere of Star Wars: The Bad Batch.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.